Luck just doesn't happen. You need to put yourself in the position of where you're going to create greatness.
Today, I'm talking about scaling sales organizations when you need to make it to the next milestone of revenue, such as from 100 million to 500 million. My guest is Anthony Bratti. He's the GM at Centerfield, and we also hit on building a sales career and why he does a cold plunge every morning. In my weekly chat with Marty Beckerman, we talk about the interview they conducted with In-N-Out Burger owner Lindsay Sutton. Do me a favor, and before listening to that segment, try to guess the average compensation of an In-N-Out store manager. Today's sponsor is Top Resume. Even when you have all the qualifications in the world, your resume needs to tell a compelling story to get the attention of a hiring manager. And that's where Top Resume comes in. They have a team of expert writers to help you create an epic narrative that outshines the competition. They even leverage their widespread network of coaches, recruiters, and consultants to get your resume in front of the right decision makers. Join the 1 million professionals that have trusted Top Resume to help them advance their careers. And for a limited time, you can secure a 10% discount for Top Resume's Executive Priority Package. Use the code BUSINESS10, that's business10 at checkout to save money and take the next step in your career today. Hey, Marty, how are you? Good to see you.
Doing great, John. How are you?
Good. And we usually talk about multiple stories when we get together each week, but this time we're just going to talk about one because I find it so interesting. And it's about the burger chain In-N-Out, mostly in California. Talk about the cult of In-N-Out, would you?
Sure. Well, very few restaurants or destinations in the way, especially fast food restaurants or destinations in the way that In-N-Out is for people when they visit California. They get off their plane, in Los Angeles, especially, there's an In-N-Out burger, 2 minutes from LAX. And, it's always got a line of cars, a mile, going out to the airport because people are so excited to go there.
Yeah. And last time I was there with my kids, my son in particular wanted to make a beeline there. He thinks the fries, the burgers, the shakes are awesome, and they are. And you had the chance to interview actually the president and owner of In-N-Out for the newsletter. And she became president, I guess, at a young age. Maybe you can tell that story.
Yeah, this is probably the biggest interview the newsletter's done in its history of an active executive. So Lindsay Snyder became head of In-N-Out Burger at 27. Her uncle and father had been in charge of it. Her grandparents founded the company. Her uncle and then father both had pretty sudden and tragic deaths, and she unexpectedly had to take over. We asked her about, did she feel people doubted her internally? Because she wasn't even 30 yet. And she said that even though nobody is fully prepared to step into that kind of role, she had worked, since she was 17, she had worked in the restaurants, with the food. She had actually worked on the carpentry of the restaurants. She had come up through the marketing department and was already running the entire marketing department herself. So she was this restaurant is kind of her birthright in a way. And the assumption had always been she was probably going to take over at some point.
Wow. Kind of a crazy way to become the president or CEO of a company. Not anything that you'd expect, but I guess she had worked there for 10 years already. In-N-Out has so many quirky and unique things about it. One of it is that they pay, especially in the quick service food industry, pretty good wages. What did you discover as part of the interview?
Sure, they've always paid above minimum wage, but the most surprising thing is how much they pay their managers, including profit sharing. Managers can make $180,000 a year at In-N-Out, which even for a Los Angeles cost of living is pretty good. And we asked her about that, and she said that they pay for good talent and they want to make sure that they have the best managers in the industry, and they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I love that. Everybody says they want a good culture. You truly attract the best talent by paying great. That's really cool. And their prices are not crazy. I went to a fast food place with my son. I won't name names a couple of weeks ago, but like a burger combo meal was $15. And in and out, although I think prices have gone up a little bit, still very affordable. What did you talk at all about growth plans for the company? I mean, I know that they're in California. I've been to one in Vegas. I think they're in Arizona. But is Lindsay thinking about national, international? How does she approach that?
They've definitely been expanding the last few years. I think they're in about 7 states now. They have 400 locations, so it's not just California. But what's really unique, since they're still a family-owned business, even though they're a really big family-owned business, they don't necessarily need to report to shareholders. They don't need to make every quarter as much of a rapid growth as possible. And so she says we have an intentional slow growth policy. They do not want to compromise on quality. They don't want to go. They could easily be in every state right now. But she says we are only going to expand as quickly as we know we can keep the quality at the same level. She doesn't want to dilute the product. And it's working. I mean, they're getting, I believe, 700,000 customers per restaurant per year. They're making billions. And, I mean, as far as religions in Los Angeles go, there's Scientology and In-N-Out Burger. So...
All right. Well, I know you can read about the entire interview in the newsletter. Thanks, Marty. Good to see you.
Thanks, John.
Hi, Anthony. How you doing? Good to see you.
Good, John. How are you doing? Nice to see you. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. Good segue because we're recording this. It's midday for me. I'm on the West Coast. You're on the East Coast. How do you feel as a sales leader, as a revenue leader, as a GM at the end of a weekday? Is it time to nap? Is it happy hour? Do you want to go on a run? What's the end of the week typically like for you?
Yeah. So it's 4:00 on Friday. I spent the beginning of the week on the West Coast, beautiful Santa Barbara. Wonderful red eye back home to a set of home experiences, as you'd expect. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to catch up on 2 workouts that I didn't have time to do during the week, which I'm very much looking forward to. So that's going to kick off the weekend.
Well, this isn't a health hack podcast, but since you brought up your routine, I know in the morning that you get up and you do a cold plunge. Talk about that. How much of it is part of your Anthony special sauce?
Yeah. So, it's a great story. So back in January, I went on a camp with a gentleman named Jesse Itzler, and, it was called an ice camp retreat. It was in Minnesota. Okay. And in that experience, John, they actually carved a hole in a lake, and the water was 30.5 degrees. And I went in that lake, and then ended up doing a 5K race around this frozen lake. And so ever since then, I came back and I have a cold plunge. And so it's set at 35 degrees. And every morning, like, just get out of bed and I go into the cold plunge to start the day, and that gets everything flowing. And it's fantastic. So
when you get up and, then you put on your slippers or whatever, are you running downstairs because you're so excited to be in the plunge? Or is it like, I've just got to do it?
Look, I took the red eye the other day, and I walked in the door at 8:45. I had a 10 o'clock meeting, and walked in, put the bags in, maybe an hour of sleep. I jumped in that cold plunge, and then I hit the ground running for the staff meeting. And so it was no questions asked. That's part of the routine that keeps it going. I do have to say, so getting in the water is hard. Just like getting up and going to the office and doing the things that we have to do every day is hard. So that's the first part's hard. And then the second part of it gives you the energy throughout the day. So if you haven't practiced, it's not a health hack podcast. That might be our next one, but definitely gives you the juice to get going. It beats that 16-ounce latte at Starbucks for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you traveled this week. I'm curious. I want to ask you all about building marketing and sales organizations, but you mentioned travel this week, coast to coast. What do you think about getting on the road these days? Is it overrated? Is it underrated? Is it properly rated as far as cultivating relationships, growing your pipeline, and getting big deals done?
Yeah, great question. It's required, and I think it's underappreciated for the folks that haven't been in that community of getting on the planes and going to go do the work. So I was in San Francisco last week at a conference called SaaStr. This week I was at a conference for Commission Junction in Santa Barbara. The themes there are very much you need to get in front of your customers. Relationships matter, and the best ways to make deals happen faster is getting out and getting in front of folks. At the end of the day, Zoom is great, but you can go to 10 Zooms in a day and have to go back to your to-do list, and it doesn't have that same impact of that in-person session and meeting. So anybody thinking about best ways to grow revenue, get people out of the office and into the office, because there's a whole learning culture that happens there, and then at the same time get out and see those customers and be where they are. The other thing is you really need to create those. Luck just doesn't happen. You need to put yourself in the position of where you're going to create greatness, and that doesn't happen sitting in your home office, sitting on a phone in a Zoom. I'm very much the last person to leave an event, and spending time and developing those dinners and those relationships with the folks, because people want to have the experience and the relationship, and you create your own luck. So in the world of commercial and enterprise and going and building businesses, that luck's created on the road. So the airports are full. And it's interesting to see. I live in Atlanta, and there's Clear, and now there's this thing called digital ID. And Clear used to be the fast paths to be able to go through it. But if you have an experienced digital ID, that gets you through nice and quick. So as lines get bigger, you can get through faster.
Oh, that's okay. I might have a follow-up question about that later. I mean, it's frustrating in LAX specifically. The Clear line's like longer than the TSA line now. And so you're saying there's a new thing that just bypasses both of those?
Yeah, it's great. It's
okay. I'm going to look that up after this. So, and by the way, I agree with you. Like, that there's this biochemical something or other reaction that occurs when you're face to face with someone, whether it's a colleague, a prospect, a customer, that AI can't replicate. And on the one hand, as efficient as Zoom is, like hopping from meeting to meeting to meeting, or in our case, just, being able to do a podcast ad hoc, when we're in the office, there's all these organic things that occur, and you can have impromptu meetings constantly. And it feels like that's more efficient now than I kind of remember or anticipated. So, Anthony, I want to talk about your experience and your playbook, if you will. You've been a revenue leader, an executive, a sales leader for some of the biggest companies in the world, like AT&T, for startups just starting from scratch as employee number one, or for stepping in as CRO for a private equity portco that we both know really well in areas like digital marketing, manufacturing, and so on. So when you start a new gig, or you were to start a new gig, and as leader, it's your responsibility. You're the one on the line that says you've got to get from 100 million to 500 million, or from 500 million to $1 billion. Can you synthesize for me kind of what's your playbook, or just distill down how you would start or approach your day one?
Yeah. John, it's interesting. Folks are really adverse to change, right? And when you're spending time either on the inside the company or working with customers, the approach to change for opportunities is it's not always, it's hard for folks. They struggle with how to do that. So really what I've mapped out over the last couple of years, and you were kind, I've done it for decades, right? But what we've mapped out, I've been able to map out, is a very prescriptive process to be able to kind of what I call like a money map, but from quote to cash, what does the customer buying experience look like, including the functional org supporting organizations, and what does that look like, and where really are the areas of opportunity? And so as you map those out, you're able to better understand, does everybody have their own swim lane that they work in, right? Or does everybody go back and forth? Are there scorecards so that when an employee wakes up every day, they know exactly what's a good day versus a bad day? And is everybody aligned around the expectations and how to get there? So the first things first, from a process standpoint, it's a very prescriptive process which works through the quote to cash of an organization to understand where the opportunities are. And the output of that starts to give you a set of work streams which are either incremental, so they're going to impact revenue in month, quarter, and year, or they're transformative, which helps drive the next 12 to 24 months of a plan. And so we've seen a lot of success in that everywhere we've gone over the last couple of years.
Oh, that's really interesting. I like how you framed that up, quote to cash, and looking at the customer buying experience. So let's say that you've mapped it out. Now you understand it. Now you know what people are working on. How do you start to take it to the next level where you know if something is broken, know if something's working, know if something should be supercharged? What's the next thing you do from there?
That's where you start to really get a lot of the great war stories as you're working through everything, right? So I'd say the next step as you've started to map those out is a very easy process, what I'll call inspect what you expect. So now you understand the quote to cash process, you know how everything happens, and now are we measuring the things that we expect to be able to happen? So for instance, if a sales rep has a quota that they need to be able to get to, does their funnel match what they need to be able to achieve that quota? And if the funnel matches, does the set amount of appointments that they need to go on and proposals out the door match? And, it's easy to assume. Somebody once told me that everybody works hard, and then looks like they're working hard, and that's the right measure of it. But really, does the data show in their dashboard that they can hit those numbers? So the next major theme is really inspecting what you expect. And I'll give you a funny story. I spent some time working with a company, and they missed their number month over month, quarter over quarter from a revenue standpoint. And the thought is that sales needs to do a better job selling. But through the quote to cash process, we were able to see finance was actually recording and forecasting revenue based on expected installs. And if you expect an install on the first of the month, which they all don't happen on the first of the month, you would expect a full month of billing just by walking through the process, as installations happen every single day. And then the revenue comes off, right? You'd obviously miss your revenue just by the fact that finance was miscommunicating what the revenue expectations were from sales. And so I think, that's just an easy alignment conversation of inspecting the forecasting, inspecting the revenue, and then tying to it.
I'm curious. So if you've inspected what you expect, and it's because I think more about the marketing side of things and the messaging and positioning in my day job, and how as a sales leader, as a strategy leader, do you know if your message is landing at companies every step of the way? So there are 5 touch points to a sale typically. Where do the alarm bells go off if you're like, maybe the message isn't working? I would imagine there's like a data element to it, but there's also an in-person element, and there's asking your sales team, and then there's understanding if what you're hearing is really true, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Can you unpack that for me?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You never know what part of the funnel where that breakdown really starts to happen. Is it at the top of the funnel, or is it at the bottom at the 5-yard line, of the funnel? And so there's a set of clear processes that we've put in place to be able to, through those dashboards, if something gets delayed, so if you forecast the deal is going to happen on the 15th of the month and it's the 17th and there hasn't been an update to it, that's one alarm bell, right? If it was supposed to close. But at the same time, if, here, the great telltale sign is that every deal is going to close on the 30th of September, right? So that's not going to happen. And there really isn't an event that's going to take place or scheduled activity that's in there in the system, right? You can only close a deal if you know you're going to have a meeting. And I'm sure all meetings are not happening the last day of the month. So I think to take your question, I think what we need to do is inspect each part of the funnel and figure out where the breakdown is. And if the breakdown is in the top of the funnel, then make sure that, our funnel is resonating with the right buyer profile. And if our messaging is just not closing, for the customers because the messaging isn't resonating, then figure out how to rework those proposals to make sure that they're working. It's especially in hyper growth modes, it takes a lot of tweaking and bending to be able to make sure that we're hitting the customer profiles.
Yeah, that's a really good point because you've been involved in a lot of companies that are doing ultra fast growth. And so there are more sales meetings happening ideally than you, Anthony, can sit in, hear about, debrief about. So you've got to kind of collect this data in some way and synthesize it. I wonder, so let's say the top of the funnel and the messaging is kind of landing and you're getting into the end and sales aren't happening. So one of the things that I've experienced from time to time is a product team or an engineering team or manufacturing team might say, well, sales isn't selling the product the right way. And the sales team might say, our product doesn't do what our customers need. And so that's what I would say is an unhealthy or unproductive conversation. How do you flip that around into one of productivity and partnership? What's your playbook for having ultra healthy and collaborative relationships with the folks who are creating the product that you're selling?
Well, and to the marketing organization. So great question, John. What I've done is set up just bi-weekly check-ins. They could be weekly or bi-weekly where we're reviewing those funnel opportunities and making sure that the sales team clearly understands what the product does and they're presenting it appropriately. And the product and marketing team are hearing the feedback from the sales about what customers like about it.
Anthony, that totally makes sense. Let me reframe the question a bit, which is, sales sometimes or all the time will want to sell more than the product has to offer, and then product marketing, the CEO always wants more leads. How do you manage this dynamic to get the most out of the team that you have?
John, sales has never seen a great lead unless there's a contract automatically tied to it, right? So the dynamic between sales, marketing, and product it's a healthy tension across the organizations, right? And so through those bi-weeklies, what we're able to establish is a set of dashboards that shows here's what's marketing's delivered, and then here's the output from a sales standpoint of what the funnel was, what closed, and what's going to happen next. From a product standpoint, here's what's generally available on the truck, to be able to sell. And then here's how sales sold it. And then maybe some other custom options, which would be able to get more customers to come in. And you can look at those through your win-loss reports or win-loss or delayed, right? And maybe there's feature scope there. But the most important thing as you go through the process is you really have to look at a philosophy I call less is more. And people also look at that as the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of our revenue and opportunities come from 20% of the prospects. At the same time, 80% of our revenue comes from 20% of the activities that we do as an organization. So as we've walked through kind of the money map and then inspecting what we expect, the next key piece is making sure that listen, we can't do everything. You can't throw darts, up on a dartboard and expect that they're all going to hit. We need to be really focused in what's that 20% of the activity that's going to drive that 80% of the growth, and then throw those 80% of the other activities as kind of like a tier 2 or have junior resources do that as best they can, but it shouldn't be an area of focus. And then so what I do is I work with the team on, hey, what's that 20% that's really going to impact our revenue and growth? cut the other 80% down, and then just add more strategic opportunities to it. And so, that theme of less is more helps us get more sales capacity, which is going to become a continuing big buzzword in the industry over the next couple of years as the economy continues down this path. But we get to add more sales capacity, more marketing capacity without adding resources to the plan. And so another critical piece is focusing on less is more. And they all create did you know moments. And, an example of a did you know moment is when you run out, you have a meeting with a customer, you have an internal meeting with a salesperson, and I come back into the office and I'm like, hey, John, did you know? And you're like, did I know what? Well, did you know that you're in a fast-paced growth business and you're doing the same thing you did, same way as you were doing it 10 years ago? And there's money in did you know moments. At the end of the day, a did you know moment could be millions and millions of dollars because we haven't really rethought the way that the new ways to be able to do it. So I'm all about creating did you know moments, and then I like to call my friends, as you know, and talk to them about it.
Yeah, I like that. Did you know? It's kind of almost like a game show title, and I want to play a little bit of a game show with you, kind of around turning back time. I think as many folks just starting their career in sales, in revenue operations, want to own a P&L. It's how do you get there? And so if we could turn back time a little bit, I said you'd been doing this stuff for years. You corrected me. You said decades. So imagine yourself 10, 20 more, whatever you want to say, years back when you could turn back time. You're a junior employee. You have big goals in mind, but you're in today's workforce. You're not in the 90s. You're not in the aughts. You aspire to have bigger goals. What would you recommend, or what would you do?
Well, I think employees really need to trust the firm that they work with. In today's world, it's so much like, oh, they want me to go to the office. Oh, somebody wants me to do more work and not get paid more for it, right? Organizations have gone through downsizes over the last couple of years, right? And that work gets sometimes put on the junior employees, and there isn't always compensation associated with that. And I think the workforce of today. So if I was a junior person in the workforce today, you have to trust the employer that you're working with and trust your manager to make sure that they're going to do what's right for you, because that's why they're in that role. They want everybody to perform. People don't wake up wanting to micromanage. They want to coach you through it. So I think if I were in today's workforce, I would trust the process to know that the company I'm working for and my boss would take care of me and they have my back. And by following that process, you create your own luck, and you're able to create those moments where you're able to grow through it. It's not going to be written down. And I think if you think about the workforce a couple of years ago, if I'm in this job for 6 months, I get promoted and I go do that job. And then if I'm in this job 2 years, I get promoted and I go do that job. In today's economy, that's not going to happen. It's not that clear cut. You need to put yourself in those situations to drive greatness across the organization and support the firm that you have. And your manager and the business, that's there want you to grow, and as they want to grow and hit their numbers and their goals. So if I had to turn back the time for decades, and I was in today's workforce, I would trust the process and know the company's going to take care of you. And if you're not at a company that's going to take care of you, then you're in the wrong spot. And if you really hate what you do and you don't want to live and do it every single day, then you got to go find something that works for you. And I think that's the most important piece. I think we've all had assignments that we didn't love, and the question is, what did you do about it as you were in that environment? No.
Yeah, I want to hit on both of the points that you just made. The first on trust. Like, I totally agree with you. The last thing that you said, which is if you can't get there with trust with your employer, please leave, because you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be happy. Your employer isn't going to be happy with results. But if you are there, get there with trust, because when there's alignment, and you're following the company's playbook, you're much more likely to have a successful outcome there. Did I synthesize what you said correctly there,
Absolutely.
Anthony?
Like when I talked about dashboards and I talked about scorecards and those types of things, John, those dashboards and those scorecards are not to inspect, are you doing your job? They're to inspect, can we help you change the process so you work less? Because working less, as we talked about, will help you focus on the areas of growth that are there. So often, Salesforce or a CRM or, hey, what does a day in the life look like, are viewed upon so negatively by by anybody in an organization as, you don't trust that I'm doing my job. You have to trust that your manager's got your back and they're trying to help you do your job quicker, faster, better. So yeah, I agree with you. And I would make sure that my junior self didn't perceive people trying to help me as inspection of me trying to get managed out of the business. It's somebody wants to help me grow. Listen, a sales guy hitting 150% of goal is great. Everybody over 100% of goal is great. You'd argue that maybe you didn't set the goal high enough, but that's
but you always got to be aggressive. I want to talk more about putting yourself into the right situation. And as you were talking about, taking someone who's earlier in their career and someone asks them to do more work, in a world where you're trusting your employer, I feel like that extra work is setting you up for some type of future promotion, compensation opportunity, something that you experience that you wouldn't get otherwise. That's what you mean by putting yourself in the right situation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, nobody wants to be taken advantage of, and nobody wants like a work-life balance that's out of control. But if you do trust in the process and you're given new things and you can kind of hustle and get after those things, I do notice the folks who do that are disproportionately rewarded. And it's not in the long term. It tends to be in the short term as folks dazzle their colleagues.
You give the ball to the shooter, to the guy that's going to get that 3-point shot, right? So if you're consistently giving the work to the people that are going to get it done, their roles and responsibilities are going to increase. Compensation will follow. But in today's environment, folks tend to ask for the compensation at the idea of doing the work just because it was that way before. And I think it's a total misnomer. Yes, you are taking some risk, but you got to trust. I just go back to the fact that you got to trust in the process, and trusting in the process will help propel your career to put you in the right situations to be able to go get it.
Yeah.
As we talked about also, it's like built on relationships. I still talk to people that I started my career with, and we've all gone different ways and different paths, and some of them have been lifelong mentors. Everybody continues to grow through their careers. The folks that I mentor, that I hired into their first roles, I still talk to them at least quarterly and check in and see how they're doing. I mean, because again, it's all about the community and the relationship. So my chuckle is, just as I've been spending time over at Centerfield, it's all about relationships and putting the right team in place to be able to grow the business.
No question. And so let's bookend here. We'll go back to the health hacks, the thing that we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. Because one thing that's been nagging me is you said you missed 2 workouts. So are you doing those like now, or you're saying you got to space them out over the weekend?
Then I'm doing them as soon as I hang up the phone with you.
As soon as you hang up the phone. All right. Okay. Right on. Good. Good.
Or in today's term, disconnect the. We're on a Zoom, right? So yeah. Disconnect the Zoom. But yes.
Yeah. Right on. Well, good to see you, Anthony. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, John. It was a pleasure.
Did you know that more than 20 million professionals and business owners visit business.com and Business News Daily? Why? It's the best place for resources, advice, and information about how to grow your business. And if your goal is to reach our audience, you should become one of our lead partners, sponsor a section of the site, or sponsor even this podcast. Reach us at business.com/connect. That's business.com/connect.